Welcome to the LiveCast Conversations With. On this show, my guests and I explore the bumps and triumphs of their journey to extract the gems from their experiences, because success leaves clues, and today we turn those clues into billboards for you. I'm your host, Gene Bernier, founder of Pealed Back, speaker and co-active coach, guiding leaders to ruthlessly pursue a life worth living. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 86. Today we have my guest, Shaheem Alam, on. Shaheem is an expert and thought leader around topics of sales, business, go-to-market, and entrepreneurship, especially in the SaaS industry. At any given time, his company helps 30 plus B2B tech and SaaS companies with their sales and go-to-marketing strategies. Overall, he has 8+ years of sales experience from D2D, cold calling, SDR, AE, and managing sales teams, and now running FiveRings marketing. Shaheem, welcome to the LiveCast.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you for that introduction as well. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. So what drew you into sales out of all the things that we could be doing? A lot of people kind of get a little scared away from it. So I'm always interested when people get into it and just excel in it.
Yeah, for sure. So this was when I was in my third year of university. And so it's me, my mom, and my two younger brothers. And like we were struggling like financially. And so what I wanted to do was actually take a year off of school, save up a year's worth of rent for my mom, and then go back, finish my schooling, get a job, whatever. So when I was doing that and I was looking for jobs, I just came across an interview for a door-to-door job, went on the field with them, and it was a commission-only job. But the commissions were nice. Like I was like, they were telling me about like, they're selling me the dream of like people making a lot of money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, I didn't and at that point, I didn't think about making like millions off of this. I was like, you know what? The commissions are pretty good. If I get a couple deals a week, I'll be able to save up a year's worth of rent within 6 months, go back to school next semester. I'm good. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into it. That's how I started basically in sales.
So what were you selling door to door?
I was selling HVAC, so furnaces, air conditioners, and water treatment systems. Yeah, that's what I was selling.
What was it? So one of my first jobs outside of high school was doing door-to-door Kirby, like selling the Kirby vacuum, or attempting to sell the Kirby vacuum.
Yeah, that's nuts. I always thought about that. I was like, how did people sell vacuums door-to-door? But then how am I selling a furnace door-to-door, right? I guess.
What was that experience like, going from never doing anything like that and then actually banging on that door? And eventually, I'm assuming, kind of sounds like there may have been a few sales that were involved in that.
Yeah, so actually I did do door-to-door before. I would say I think a year or so, like the previous summer or the summer before that I did it. It was like selling it was like for charity.
Okay, yeah.
Just selling like monthly charity donation subscriptions, whatever. And I sucked. Like I got fired. I did it for 2 weeks and I got fired. But that always bothered me. I was like, like I see these other people doing. So that was always like a chip on my shoulder. I don't know, like cracked my ego, whatever you want to call it. But yeah. So that was always something. And then this time around, it was like, like this is my redemption. Like I'm gonna figure this out now. And they're paying me commission only, so they don't care to bring me on and help. Like if I go 2 months without making any money, they don't care. It's not on their dollar, right? So when I started, then I sucked again. I went 3 weeks with no sales. I'm working like 6 days a week at that point, like 12, 13-hour days, making no money, like not a single dollar for 3 weeks. But I kept I kept learning. Like I kept asking my manager, like kept pitching to him, pitched to my family, my friends, started learning Brian Tracy, psychology of selling, started learning from that. So I invested a lot into I'm gonna figure this out, because there's something that Brian Tracy says, and he says, there's nothing worse than seeing people who are dumber than you making more money than you. This is something that he says. And I'm like, I see people from all walks of life just making money. I'm like, man, if they can do this, I can do it too. So yeah, like I invested in it. And then 3 weeks later, I got my first sale, and it was kind of from there. I'm like, okay, now I got it, and now it's just repeat.
And then once you've got it, you got that confidence, and you've learned probably
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing is that you learned how to like go through this and refine it and actually be open to that advice and that feedback to like continue to tweak it. And then you got that first sale. Was that a bit of like a celebration moment?
It was. I was so happy. It was like we were getting paid like $600 for a sale. If you sell a furnace, you make $600. Like,
Yeah.
that's nuts. Like if I worked minimum wage, I'm making that less than that in a week, right?
Yeah.
So, and I made two of them. One of them got canceled, but the other one went through. So yeah, no, it was definitely a very good feeling. It was that high of
That's all.
the first experience of that high that you get from making a sale. And it's addicting. It is.
And obviously you've continued to play in that realm. So where's that experience now taken to what you're doing with FiveRings marketing?
I mean, that was like what, 2014. So we're here 8 years later. I actually like stuck around in that industry for about 5 years. In the middle, there are a lot of ups and downs in that industry, and we
Yeah.
can dive into that. I'm happy to. But like at some point, it wasn't working out, so I actually left HVAC. I joined a startup called Street Context. It's a fintech company. I was an SDR, sales development rep, and I did that for a couple months. But then I had to go back into HVAC because um so so there's so many lessons here, but basically like they don't teach you about money in school, right? So me, I've never seen money in my life. I started making good money, but I didn't pay my
Yeah.
taxes. And so the CRA, right, the Canada Revenue Agency,
Yeah.
they pretty much came to my home. Well, that was my business address. They came to my home, gave me a bill for $110,000. I'm like,
Ooh.
okay, well, I'm an SDR making like 40K plus a bit of commissions. Like, this is not gonna work. I have to go back. I have to go back to HVAC. So went back into the game, started making good money again, started paying off my tax bill basically.
Yeah.
And then couple years later, again, I was actually at a very low point. Like my whole experience with HVAC was just up and down, up and down. And then I left again, and I started working for a construction technology company called Renorun. Amazing company, amazing founders, culture, people. Like I learned so much there that I'm still implementing in our company today. And then around that time, my fiance and my business partner, Nilafar, we started on FiveRings. So I'd be working full time at the company. Nilu actually took a year off and went full time on it on her own.
Wow.
And then I'd work on it after work, basically. And we started building from there, got a few clients. And I'm like, we've been in sales. She's really good at sales. Like she was getting job offers left, right, and center. One of her friends said, hey, instead of working for a company, just why don't you start a business and serve all of them, like help all of them. So
Right.
that's kind of how we got started. And yeah, we kind of learned on the job a little bit too with FiveRings, but that's what we do, right? That's what I do. So yeah.
Well, I think with anything, like learning has to be baked into it, right? And especially when you're building something, working with teams and all the other stuff that goes along with it is like if you're not open to that learning, be like sometimes those lows can be extended for quite some time,
Yeah.
right? And it's that learning that's going to help you get through it and make the next chapter sometimes better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think learning is a big part of it. I think you have to always be like, I think you just have to like know that like you just don't know it all and just
Yeah.
accept that. Yeah.
And sometimes that can be a little bit humbling, especially to the ego when you're like, I'm crushing it right now. What can't
Yeah.
stop me? And then life's always listening, going, you want to find out? Oh, okay, here's
Yeah.
what's going to stop you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're working with the renovation company, and what were some of the things that you were able to take from there, from having such a great experience with them to
hmm
grow and now applying that within your own company?
Yeah, they did a lot of things right, culture wise. Like they have a very transparent culture. Like their all hands meetings were very transparent, always sharing things, sharing numbers. Even like if they like let go of somebody, they're sharing it with the whole company, letting them know, hey, this is what happened. This is the reason why we made that decision, and just
Right.
very open and transparent. So
Ooh.
that's something we definitely implement in our company, because I think like if everyone's going to be part of the same team, like we're a team and we're all working towards the same goal, then transparency is so huge. So that's one thing I definitely learned from them. What else did I learn from them? I learned how to use HubSpot over there, and now like I'm helping like all our clients with HubSpot, but I learned it by just being an AE.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say like culture wise, just the way that they did things, how they treated their people, was just amazing. It was like first class,
Right.
and that's what I'm implementing at FiveRings.
So would it be fair to say from your experience in like culture, like a great culture is like the defining difference of it's almost a competitive edge then for a company.
It is. It is. It's like it's weird. Like it's not something you can pitch when you're selling, but I feel like it is something that people read when they're buying.
Right.
I think as they're looking at your company, even online, as they're kind of seeing your presence online, as they're speaking to your people, like eventually
Yeah.
when you're no longer doing founder-led sales, when your people are the ones selling and your people are the ones managing accounts, that goes through them, and so they can really
Big
see
time.
the culture. And so I think that's huge, like huge. Yeah,
Well,
we'll
that's
hire people for culture sometimes where, like, there's so many times where we're hiring for a role, we interview someone and they're not the best fit for that role, but we're like, you're such a good culture fit. Like, we want you on our team. Like, we'll find a role for them and
right.
give them and then offer them that role. Yeah.
Yeah. You're able to find you identify be like you're the type of people that is going to make a difference here. So
Yes.
let us allow you to do that, and then wherever that organically can fit in, and for the right
Exactly.
reasons for the business. And so, as you were talking about switching from like founder sales to like
Hmm.
employee led sales, is like a lot of times, well, maybe not a lot of times, maybe that's not fair, but there's been some instances in the past where business would be like, these are our values, we're all about being transparent, and it's lip service, and then when you engage with the people, it's
Hmm.
their actions and the way that they bring it out will either say yes they're aligned to that, or no they're not. So from having that experience of being with a company that says, hey, we're transparent to the point of why we're letting people go, why we're hiring people, where the numbers are,
Hmm.
that's living to that highest level of basically saying their word is impeccable. Transparency is
Hmm.
what this means, and here's how we're going to live up to it.
Exactly. And I think like beyond, like a key component of transparency is also just honesty. Um, like coming from the industry, HVAC industry, man, like everyone's just trying to play you. Like you
Yeah.
don't know who to trust. People are just trying to play you. I've like been screwed over for commissions all the time. Like I'm still owed like tens of thousands in commissions, which I'll never see. So trust was such an important thing for me. And so
Yeah.
then coming into a culture and seeing, wow, like they're sharing their numbers. They're just being very honest and transparent. Like I think that's made an impact on me. And I think that's something that humans in general value. So that's why we definitely implement that here and have very open and honest conversations with our employees. Um, and I think they appreciate that. I also feel like it leads to better conversation when you're honest, because usually the other person is feeling or thinking the same thing.
Right.
You're not you can both just have an honest discussion. I think it goes a very long way.
But it allows you to get right to the crux of it versus like trying to dance around and break down the defenses and everything else. It's just like,
Hmm.
well, what if we just talked about the issue and got right
Yeah,
to it and accepted that the two people talking about this are separate from the issue itself, and then a lot more can happen that way.
exactly. And I think like it's so important to just express like how you feel. I think it's so like it's important to be aware of how you're feeling, number
Mm.
one, and then to communicate how you're feeling. And that's important in your personal relationships with your significant other, with your friends, your family, and it's just as important in business and in with your employees. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I feel frustrated when because of this and this, right? And
Right.
like when you talk about your feelings, the other person is just able to understand it way more than if you're just talking about facts, because you're not bothered by facts, you're bothered because it makes you feel a certain way.
Yeah. Well, that's a
Yeah. So,
great distinction there between facts and feelings is, and it's
mhm.
true. And if you can get to the place of building that, I don't know if it's vulnerability, safety, you use the word trust, like all those I think come together to be in a place to be able to be like, hey, I need to share how I'm feeling about this, and knowing that
Mhm.
you're going to accept, at least hear that and try to understand that, so we can work through it and actually work together a lot better.
Yeah. And the reason why it also leads to better conversations is because you cannot argue feelings. Like, you can't dispute a feeling. You can dispute
Yep.
facts, you can dispute numbers and this and
True.
that, like he said, she said. But if I say I feel a certain way, you can't tell me no you don't, you actually feel this way. Like, no, like, and then if the other person's expressing how they're feeling and maybe why they're acting a certain way because of how they're feeling, I can
Yeah.
understand that, right? So if you get to that level of, hey, like, this is how we feel because we're humans and we're all emotional beings, it just leads to better conversations, honestly.
Oh, and is that maybe part of like this, when you think about your culture fit now within your company, is like when you're looking for that culture fit, going, are these people accepting that this feeling is happening in this other, and then how do you hold that as something important within the culture of the team?
Well, I don't know how you can necessarily hire for it. By the way, my co-founder, like Nilu, she is way better at hiring than I am, and like hiring for culture fit and all that stuff. Like, she's definitely who you need to be talking to about this. But I think it's tough to hire based off like that specific thing. But I think it can come out when you start doing it yourself. The other person kind of
Yeah.
reciprocates it, and
Mm,
you just see that, hey, well, this is not what the culture is. This is how we communicate, and so they start communicating better.
right. I think that's important, especially like in a marketing team that's focused around sales, is like having a strong culture, like you shared before in the HVAC world. Like sometimes sales used to be a dog eat dog experience. So being able to
Yep.
have everybody aligned and being able to, like, kind of row in the same direction actually is a lot more beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, agreed on 100%. Yeah.
So how does that translate then when you're working with your clients? Because if I understand right, like FiveRings focuses on B2B tech startups, right?
hmm Um, yeah, I mean, I think like the same kind of stuff, like honesty, transparency, it translates to clients too. Something's going wrong, you communicate it and you kind of just like just say it, and that's how it would translate there. I think that's what you were kind of asking. I'm not sure if I'm answering
I
the
think.
question correctly or.
Well, I think yes, that's kind of where it initially was going. But like, is that, I guess, where the question for me is coming? Do you hold the client relationship at that same level, going, hey, we've got this rich culture of being aligned, being open, and bringing in the right clients to work within that? Because not everybody, again, is going to be the
Hmm,
right type of client to receive that
interesting.
type of.
That's interesting because I feel like, yeah, we definitely like qualify, disqualify clients based off of, just who we're actually going to be able to help and who we know we can't help. So I know that we definitely, do that. Um, in terms of bringing on clients that are also a culture fit, that's an interesting point. Maybe that's the next level of qualification. Uh, oh, I haven't thought of that.
Oh, all right. And sometimes, I guess, maybe, do you ever get in that? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But get into the position where you're like, you've noticed that there's that misalignment from the client once you're actually in it with how you guys end up working.
Mm. Yeah, I think that gets down to like just I think a lot of things with client management, it's managing expectations. And so we do a lot from like literally the first meeting with our AE to the onboarding to like like the meetings that, what's that word? Subsequent, consecutive, I don't know, but the meetings that come afterwards.
Yeah.
um there's a lot of work to just manage expectations. We want to make sure that like they understand what we are able to deliver and what we're going to deliver, and it's just like
Right.
crisp, clear understanding. Like the amount of times we have that conversation, it's nuts. So I think it's really about managing expectations. And so when you start that relationship and we start doing the work, we have like a north star, like, okay, the expectations are here, and if we're
Oh, I
ever
love it.
kind of like going away from it, then we know corrective action needs to be taken. But at least both of us are on the same page as to where we're going.
Right. And that's so
Yeah.
important, I think, in any relationship, but especially in that
Oh
client
yeah.
relationship. If you can set, hey, before we get too carried away, here's where our North Star is, so that when we always
Hmm.
look up, we're going to get into the trenches, we're going to start doing work. Occasionally we might drift, or you might drift, and we
Hmm.
want to come back to say, hey, this is where we're really going, right? Yes,
Exactly.
cool. Are we still going there? Yes, cool.
And that's it. And I feel like in business, like I think a lot of times, like if like clients are upset or unhappy or whatever, like a lot of times just because they just expected something else.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't communicated, if you didn't have that conversation, then sorry, my Siri just started for some reason. But if you didn't have that conversation, then you can't expect them to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's an important one to have, right? And you can feel it within the in the context of it is like when the expectations aren't in alignment, that's the amount of disalignment is like the amount of like trouble you have to deal with. So the smaller you can keep that from like here's
Yeah.
the expectations and here's what's happening in reality, the better off everybody gets to be, because then they're going, yeah, you guys crushed it. FiveRings is always on it for us and deliver
Hmm.
regardless of it being in a position of going, oh, like sometimes in the middle there was some frustrations, but
Hmm.
the end point, and we always came back to it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, yeah. You kind of like, we learned that along the way for sure. I think like any new business owner will learn that along the way, but the sooner you can work on that, the better. And you also learned, you also throughout, like you for your first few clients, like you don't even know what you can deliver, right? So you can't even set expectations. You're just
Yeah.
trying to do as best as you can, basically. That's what you can promise them is that, hey, I'm gonna do the best that I can. Like realistically,
Yeah.
that's what it is in your first few clients. But once you build that out, you have the data, you know what you can do and what you can't do, then definitely set expectations.
Oh, 100%. And then that's that part of that growth too. Like I think speaks back to your earlier stories. Like, well, you didn't know what you didn't know, but you were willing to get into it, willing to learn, and willing to like hold like some importance in the relationship. Going, we're going to do our best, and we're going to keep refining that. And now you've got it down to a fine art by the sounds of it.
Hmm. I don't know about a fine art, but I think like it's just as long as you just like kind of like just follow those principles of communicate, be honest, be transparent, set
Yeah.
expectations, manage it. Yeah.
So, how exactly are you working with your clients, and like what are you delivering to them?
Yeah, for sure. So we help our clients with top of the funnel. So we help them get meetings with decision makers
Okay.
in their industry. So if they need to talk to, I don't know, if they need to get in touch with like CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, like chief information security officers, IT leaders, sales leaders, HR leaders, whoever it is that's going to buy their product. Basically, we do outreach via LinkedIn and cold calling to book them meetings with those decision makers.
Right. So you help them understand where that target is, and then make the plan to go off and start reaching out to them. And then if once you get that warm response, hand it back into their internal team.
Yeah, so we do help on the targeting side quite a bit. Some of our clients they come, they say, "Hey, honestly, like we think it's this target market, but we really don't know." And so we'll do a lot of experimentation. Others know exactly who their buyers are and come with
Right.
like a much more formulated strategy. And so we go based off of that. And then we learn, we put it out there and we learn what works, what doesn't work, what messaging works, what doesn't work. And yeah, our team handles it to the point where the meeting is actually booked onto their calendar. So we get a good response, we do the back and forth, follow ups, objection handling, whatever, to the point that the meeting's actually booked on the calendar.
Right. And then they can go off, and it's up to them then to close and move forward from there.
Yeah, that's where the lead is handed off. But we definitely like we meet
Yeah.
with them weekly or biweekly to check in, be like, hey, how was that was a really good call you said you had a month ago. Like, how's that progressing, right? Like we like I think like one of the other things that's so important in terms of like the culture fit and as a business owner, as a company, it's like just like we actually care. Like
Right.
when a client closes a deal from one of the leads we got them, we're pretty excited because that's like a real impact that we're having. Like their startups, the companies that they're creating, that's their dream, that's their baby, that's like their goals. Like that's their life. And so
Yeah.
if we're able to help them become more successful in that and help them grow that business, that's like helping them get closer to their dreams and their goals. And I think like that's like a real impact you're having on somebody, right? People think of like B2B, business to business, it's like businesses, no, these are people. Like
Yeah.
these are people's, a business is someone's dream. And a business is the vehicle that they're using to achieve that dream. And if you're having an impact on that, that is huge.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it, right? And that's also can make you a lot more courageous when you're out there viewing it from this is a dream of somebody that they've trusted us with their dream. Now we get to go out and help spread this dream around. And
Yeah.
you're also connecting it because it's on the other side is somebody else's dream going, oh, our two dreams match up and make some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think understanding that is it's I think it would be a game changer for
Yeah.
a lot of people for sure.
Was that something that you inherently knew, or is this something that like a concept for you, like that you've grown over time to have like kind of that aha moment? Because it kind of came out so smoothly from you.
um so I don't know, I have a tendency to kind of like phrase things like that. It just happens, but I think that being a business owner ourselves, like we know we pour our heart and soul into this. And so when you're a business owner, you start to appreciate other business owners.
Yeah.
You know that they are sacrificing time with their friends, they're sacrificing time with their families, they're putting their life savings into this thing, like they're giving it all. And 1 in 10 startups fail. So they're doing all of this, sacrificing all of this, knowing that there's a 90% chance of them failing. Like that's a lot. Right?
That's a
And
lot of
so
pressure. Yeah.
it is a lot of pressure. And so I think because we have done that in our business and we put in that time, that effort, the sacrifices, you start to appreciate the other side and you understand it from that perspective.
Right. That's awesome. And as well, like you've just started up your own podcast, what the SaaS, interviewing the like founders that
Mm-hmm.
are in these spots, from being in the interview seat versus the client service seat. What are you learning differently or hearing differently from them now versus if you were just servicing them as a client?
I think like one of the biggest lessons to learn from that is really like there are so many different paths. Like there are
Oh,
so many different ways people find themselves into becoming a startup founder. There are some people that have worked in the corporate world solving the same problems and now they want to build a product to solve that problem. There are
right.
others that kind of had a job and they're like, hey, like why are we why like they just see like the company doing something or using a specific tool and they're like, I could build that. I'm going to go ahead and build that and I'm just going to do that. Others are just like, hey, you know what? Like I want to solve this problem. I'm going to quit my job and I'm just going to risk it all and just do that. Like there's so many different paths to this. Some people start with investment, other people have bootstrapped
Right.
their companies. Some people like got their first customers like it kind of through their network and it came to them easily. Others struggled for like a year to get their first customers.
Right.
There's so many different paths, but I think like what's common between them all is that like, and I truly like believe in this. It's just like just keep going. Like there's that saying or whatever, like it's you can't beat someone that never quits, right? Like you only ever
Yep.
lose if you give up, whatever, like all those sayings, like they're so true though. You can't lose if you don't quit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they can kind of sound a little bit cliche, but it's
Yeah.
important for that though too.
Yeah, it is. It always reminds me of my like so I have two younger brothers, right? When we were younger, we'd like be wrestling and stuff. And so when we'd be wrestling, like you got to tap out if you're in too much pain. My youngest brother, okay? He also works with us, works for FiveRings now too. His name is Samir. But my youngest brother, like he would not tap out. Like we would be like he'd be in pain, but he
Yeah.
knows we're his brothers and we're not actually gonna break his arm. We're not actually gonna do something. So he would not tap out. And so we'd get frustrated and eventually just stop. But he never lost then. And it's like he never lost. So like, I always think of that when I think of that kind of the saying, but you can't
Yeah.
beat someone that doesn't quit.
That's
That's
true.
what it is. It's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty like an interesting insight to have learned from that is like you're right, like everyone at the end of the day is like the people that are being an entrepreneur trying to build that business, trying to take that dream from something, even though that's kind of everyone's end goal in that area, they're all got a different starting point, and they've all taken wildly different paths to get there, and in their own journey and exploration of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually, when I have like enough, um, I guess podcast episodes under my belt, I'm probably gonna make like a blog or something with all the lessons that I've learned from that. But one of the most common ones that I've heard from the ones that have built, like that have sold companies, that have had successful acquisitions, or they're running like a
Yeah.
500 employee company, and it's a very common theme. They say, listen to your customers. Like, just never stop listening to your customers.
Yeah.
It's what I hear. It's like probably the most common thing that I hear. And so if anyone's listening to this, and they're starting a business, any kind of business, just keep listening to your customers.
Right. And how do you bring that into your own, like bring that insight back into your own team and everything to make sure that you're not kind of like getting too overly confident that you're not open to that learning, to that listening, to that understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to still be like involved at a ground level a little bit, even if you're stepped out quite a bit. Like we're at a point where I'm still involved in like client meetings here and there. I'm not in all of them, but I'm in some of
Yeah.
them. But I do sync up with our account managers, the ones that are speaking to our clients on a daily, weekly basis. And so whenever they hear stuff, like they know that they can just come and tell us whatever, right? Like they just know they
Right.
can communicate to us. So they tell us these things that clients are feeling. So we always like listen to that. And if we see a couple clients are saying the same thing, or there's a little bit of a trend, like we act on it right away. Like if something needs to be fixed, let's fix it. If they like something, let's double down on it, right? But
Right.
really, like either you're doing it yourself or the people that are at your front line, listening to them. I think it's so important. Yeah.
Yeah, and being able to take that in and kind of like reflect on it and share that back to them as well as like an opportunity to really build that understanding. And again, it comes back down to like you're setting expectations, you're putting that trust and vulnerability into it, and you're just showing that you're there for them for the right reasons, which at the end of the day just strengthens that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think like it's important for your employees to also feel like that, hey, if there was like a tough conversation they had with a client, that they can come to you and talk to you about that, not to just like tell you or vent, but they know that they can look up to you for guidance on that, or to
Right.
just vent. Like that's true too. Like sometimes we have those kind of conversations too, right? And that's fine. But when you have that kind of a relationship with your employees, they're coming to you whenever, if it's good or bad, and they're excited when it's good. They're like shooting
Yeah.
me like a Slack message saying, hey, like this just happened. I'm excited for them. But that's how you keep your ear to to the streets or whatever. Keep your ear to the streets, but
Yeah.
you're always on the ground, and you're able to keep listening to your clients that way.
Yeah. And I guess that if you flip that around, it's just like just keep listening, period, right? Like in your
Yeah.
role is like you're listening for the clients, but you're also listening for your team too, to
Yeah.
keep that ear to that street, to understand what's coming up and to notice the subtle shifts, so you're not caught blindsided by any of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, you have to keep a pulse on how your team is feeling. Like what is the general energy that's going on? Like it's so
Yeah.
crazy. Like it's like there's no formula a lot of times. A lot of times it's just feeling. Like it's just being
Yeah.
aware of like this is the energy in my company, or hey, like we were high energy, but for some reason this week it feels a bit low, and then you just check in and be like, hey,
Yeah.
notice your energy was a little bit low, is everything okay? And again, it's just about communicating. Like you
Yeah.
feel something. I feel like the energy is a little bit low right now. Like are you feeling that too, or like is everything okay? However
Right.
you want to phrase it, but it
Yeah.
just goes back to that being aware of your feelings, your team's feelings, and the general energy that's going around in the company.
And you've said this a couple times, but it's just, you're dealing with people, right? At
Yes.
the end of the day, it's like you're not an hour, you're not like a deliverable, you're not these facts. Be like, you're a person. How
Yeah.
are you? You're important.
Yeah.
You're here, and you choose to be here, and we've chose to have you here, so that makes you important. How are you doing?
Yeah. Exactly. And I think like actually like there's like a formula, I guess, or a tip or whatever to like being able to do this. But the what I've found is that you understand other people really well when you understand yourself well.
Mm.
The reason why is because if you understand like why you feel a certain feeling, like what makes you feel that way or what ticks you off, what makes you happy, why you feel certain emotions in certain
Yeah,
situations, you start realizing that humans are all the same. Everyone's the
they are.
same. Everyone
Yeah,
feels guilty. Everyone feels embarrassed. Everyone feels shy. Everyone feels offended. Everyone feels happy for certain things, proud, right? Like everyone wants to feel like some that they're making someone else proud or making someone else feel a certain way. So everyone wants to be appreciated. So you start realizing that, hey, I need all of these things and I feel a certain way when things happen. So
right,
therefore, and the world doesn't revolve around me, everyone else feels the same way as well with those same things.
right.
We're all the same. Like humans, we're all the same. We're just
Yeah.
these box of like, I don't know, this box of feelings and reactions and emotions just like walking around, trying to make sense of this world. Like that's really what we are.
Yeah, yeah. I think that sums it up really well. Like, but we really are so we are all like we all have those same feelings for, and we have different things that are triggering those feelings, and that's just
Yes.
the story component of it. Is but if you can go, hey, I feel this when this happens, doesn't mean that that story's happening for them, but I get what that feels like, and maybe I can
Mm-hmm.
now be empathetic, or I can at least relate or step into this place of understanding with them, be like,
Mm-hmm.
I see you. What's going on? I don't need to get it, but I need to get you though. And I think that's a
Yeah.
subtle difference.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, and it just keeps going back to the same thing. It's the feelings.
And in community, right? Like within your company, you're making this community and you're building these relationships, and now you're building this with your clients, with your podcasting, and I know that you guys, speaking of community, that you have, I think you have like a Slack community or something around.
Mm-hmm.
Is it around the podcast period, or just for B2B people to have a conversation like like this?
Yeah, it's although the name of the community is the same as a podcast, like what the SaaS, but no, it's not around the podcast at all. Actually, the community is a community we want to build within the SaaS industry with founders, investors, sales leaders, other kind of leaders, just to have a place where people can ask others in the industry questions, get some resources, get some help. It's in its early stages for sure. It's in its infancy,
Yeah.
but we're yeah, we're planning to grow it. We're actually hiring for someone, a community manager
Oh, very
that can help
cool.
us grow that. So definitely investing a lot onto that side to build this community within the SaaS world.
Right. And that link down is down below, along with the all the other links for the podcast and the Five Rings marketing is down in the description below. What inspired you to build the community on top of all the other things that you've got going on?
Shout out to Colin Mitchell. Let's say shout out to Colin Mitchell. He runs a sales cast and he has a great community. I was on his
Yeah.
podcast and then I got entered into this community. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, and you just have people engaging. I know there are other communities too. There are some that have like
Yeah.
22,000 members and like you can't really get anything out of it. It just gives me stress when I look at it. But there's others that are a little bit more like close knit, and if it's like
Yeah.
moderated and curated in terms of who's in it, I think it can actually be very helpful. I know it's been helpful for me. So yeah, that's part of it. Part of the reason why I saw that was working, and then like business wise, as I was telling you kind of before we went live, like I think just brand development and brand awareness, if you can have a community, have a podcast and do things like that, get yourself out there into the community,
Yeah.
then people know about FiveRings more.
Right. And it's in the write up you talked about being a thought leader and an expert, and it's an opportunity to share that and
Mm-hmm.
to culture more of it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you know how he said before we got on that at some point I'd look up and be close to 40 minutes. Well, we're right
Right.
on the mark, man. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to give a shout out before we hit our last question?
Anything that I would want to give a shout out for, or
Yeah,
like,
like
or a
now,
topic of discussion, or
maybe Five Rings. Give a quick little plug there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, FiveRings Marketing. You can find us at fiveringsmarketing.com. You can reach out to our amazing AEs, Nadine on LinkedIn or Akram or myself or Nilufar as well, just to find out more about our services. Again, it's top of the funnel. Get you meetings with decision makers so you can focus on closing deals, not getting meetings. And then, yeah, What the SaaS is our podcast and our Slack community as well.
Perfect. And again, everything's down in the descriptions down below. Definitely go check them out. All right, my friend, before we wrap up, I've got one question I ask everybody. So we're going to jump into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years. When we open that door, you get to give yourself one piece of advice. What would that be?
Oh, there's so many things. So many things. I would say, like, the one piece of advice I would say, so I think a lot of the things that I know today did happen because of my experiences, and I probably wouldn't want to replace those experiences. So I wouldn't say that I would have learned to read people better or learned to, like, not trust everyone. Like, those kind of lessons I feel like you have to go through and learn. So the one piece of advice I would say is learn how to manage money. That would be like my biggest thing I would tell myself at 18. Learn how to manage your money, Shaheem, because that's gonna come and bite you. It's gonna come and bite you in the ass after.
I love it. I haven't had that one before, so that's great. And it's really important because you definitely don't want the CRA knocking on your door because they don't go away.
Yeah.
All right.
We're all good now, though, for the record.
You're on good standings. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure to have this conversation and just to get to see where it goes. And to everybody else, thank you very much for watching. This is the LiveCast Conversations With, and we'll be back next Wednesday. We'll see you then. Have a good one.
Thank you, Gene.